Hi, welcome to Enrichment Night with Vermont Works for Women. I'm Missy Mackin, and I just want to give a brief overview of the event. We usually do Enrichment Night monthly at the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility. This event allows the women there to hear from a professional in the community about her work, to learn about barriers and challenges that presenters have faced along their path, and to consider any tools or strategies that have helped the presenters reach their goals, overcome challenges, or be successful in their career. We usually meet on the third Tuesday of the month. Today, I'm interviewing Sophia Rabe of Olive and Milo Social in Burlington, and we're just gonna have a chat. So, Sophia, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
That's great. Thanks so much for joining us. So we were talking a little bit about how your company got started. Would you like to start with that?
Yeah. After I graduated from Champlain College in Burlington. And after I graduated, I had a lot of interests, but I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with them. And so I kind of fell into a job doing I was the regional head of marketing for a company that was out west. And I was working remotely from home, which, out of, being 21, that sounded luxurious to already have a working from home job. But a couple years later, I really didn't like it. And I was doing mostly digital marketing, social media marketing for this company out west. And they wanted me to, it was right when Instagram and Facebook started becoming really popular for businesses. And they wanted me to start experimenting with it to see if I should make a decision to have the company start using them for marketing purposes. But they asked me to kind of do a social experiment on the side on my own with it, and start on my own rather than starting it with the company. And it honestly made me a little uncomfortable, and I was, kind of nervous to be vulnerable and put myself out there on social media to then report back to a business and say, yeah, I put myself out there and it worked great. Let's do it for a company. And wasn't really sure what to do with that obstacle that I had there. And so my husband had this idea. We have a pet pig, a mini pig, and a cat, and that's who Olive and Milo is. And so he was like, why don't you just be that crazy lady that makes an Instagram account for your pig and don't tell anybody, but at least you'll understand the ins and outs of this software and how it comes to be and what it's like to deal with, strange people on the internet and, what that means. And it ended up honestly going much more viral than I expected. And I was dealing with this really big audience and was dealing with a lot of companies saying, how did you do that? And, what are you working with? And so I went back to the company I was working with and, started doing it. And then after a couple of years, I was just like, I'm helping so many other people do this just naturally that I kind of want to do this on my own. And I was a marketing major anyway, so it kind of worked. So that's when I started my own business and named it Olive and Milo. And so ever since then, I've been helping other companies, both in Vermont and out of Vermont, nonprofits and small businesses, bigger businesses, help be present and show up online through social media and other digital marketing avenues.
That's great. So how long has the company been in existence?
About 3 years.
Many of the women who will be watching this are interested in starting their own businesses. And I'd love to have you talk a little bit about how you started and grew that business.
Yeah. I don't want to say by accident, but I also don't want to say with a lot of planning. I was always, I think it's, part of my personality and, maybe a lot of the women can relate to this where I kind of knew what I wanted. And, I never really did well in school. I wasn't your picture perfect student. I wasn't a book learner. I was more of a doer learner. And I always was kind of going off and doing my own things, or saying, what if I could do this project instead of take this test? Or it was just kind of, it was always how I was. I didn't really realize that until I was older, but sometimes it would cause me trouble in school because I just, again, always wanted to be using my hands or doing my own thing. And I didn't learn well just, reading a book or listening to someone talk. I just wasn't that type of learner. And it was really hard where I went to school in a rural area of Vermont, because school was really meant for the people who can learn really well by sitting in a lecture and then going and regurgitating that information. So I was kind of always doing side projects and stuff on my own like that. So when the opportunity arose to kind of do it for other people on my own rather than doing it for this company, I just kind of started doing it, and then was honestly just really unhappy in my job. And it took just having a vulnerable conversation with a friend for them to be like, why aren't you just doing this on your own? You're kind of already doing it on your own. Why don't you make a thing about it, or thing out of it? So I went home and I built my website that night, which I had previous experience in doing. And then I just kind of went for it. And started out by helping, kind of building my portfolio by networking and working with people that I knew so that I could kind of get a foundation. And then it was kind of just a matter of continuing to network and, talking to people and just, showing up where I felt like I needed to show up. And I think, the nice thing about starting a business in Vermont, which a lot of people find is really difficult, and I think sometimes is really difficult, but the nice part about it is that we have such an amazing community, and word of mouth spreads like wildfire. I have a cat in the background, sorry. There's Milo. That's one of the biggest obstacles about working from home. And so I think, again, so being in such a tight-knit community has been really helpful to build a small business, because you just talk to a lot of people and everyone kind of knows each other, and that kind of just helps build a big network. And I think that was one of the biggest keys in starting a business.
And working in the co-working space in Burlington, you said has been helpful.
Yeah, so my first year and a half of starting this business, I was working alone from home. And that was both hard personally, just because I didn't have, I was alone, I was in isolation, which sometimes is nice, but it's also nice to just have company, or just have someone to bounce ideas off of, or just be motivated by, people sitting near you kind of focused on their work as well. But it's also hard to network, especially if you're not going to events 24/7, or, there's some people who work from home and then spend every single evening at a networking event, but not everyone can be expected to do that, or that's not always realistic. So it was hard working from home and being able to build a business. So I joined VSET, which is the co-working space, and just being surrounded by other people who were in the same mindset of starting a business, or just, wanting to help other people, that did a full 360. And I ended up, it was not only nice because I could have structure in my day, but it was nice because half the people in there hired me and I hired them, and it was just like a really great partnership, and it's an awesome community to be a part of.
That's wonderful. You mentioned professional organizations and networking. Are you a member of any organizations locally that enable you to network?
VSET has been kind of the biggest one, because there's a lot of kind of like smaller events off of VSET. Like there's the Male Founders series, which is an awesome series, and stuff like that. And then there's a lot of really great groups out there, and I've tried a lot of them, and I feel like you kind of have to try some of them, and some of them don't really work, or you don't really like the vibe of all of them, so you switch around. I tried going to BNI at one point, which I never remember what this stands for, Business International Networking, I think. And that one I just didn't really click with how they, did it. But again, it was kind of just a matter of like trying to stick my feet in the water everywhere I could in the beginning. But then I found that like the biggest tool, I think there's a lot of pressure to kind of show up to all these places and do all the right things. But I think the biggest part is just talking to people and, doing things like this, or just, talking to your neighbors or talking to your friends, or just share what you're doing. And in such a great community like we have in Vermont, that in itself is networking, just having the conversation.
Right. And what does VSET or VSET stand for?
He's at Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies.
Right.
So it's for startups that are, it's a co-working space for startups that are in the technology realm, whether that means an app or a digital online business or, but we even have people writing books in there. So technology is kind of a broad term with, with what that means.
We're always told that we need to have an elevator speech when we're talking to folks to introduce ourselves and what we do. Would you be willing to give me a version of your elevator speech so that the women who
of course
can learn?
So my name is Sophia Rabe, and I own Olive and Milo Social, and we help all businesses tell their story online and stand out from the crowd through different ways of social media marketing, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, and cut through the noise through telling their story and about what makes them original and great.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to. I actually, when I went to Champlain, they had events specifically for elevator pitches where you would actually get in the elevator and you would have 20 seconds to tell it to whoever you were in the elevator for. And it was, again, because I wasn't really your traditional school learner, it was like the most intimidating thing for me. But then I think, once you kind of get going and, like you said, everyone asks you to come up with your elevator pitch. And I think that in itself is a tough activity. But then once you kind of start doing what you love to do, it kind of just becomes natural to be able to talk about it and say it quickly and give a quick speech.
Yes, I think so. I think actually standing in an elevator would be really difficult.
It was hard. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we were all like lined up outside the elevator, and it was like, your turn. And then you'd get off at the top and you'd come back down the stairs and you'd go kind of what you wanted to do. And
that's fun though.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a good way to do it.
Yeah. Jump right in.
Yeah. So what challenges have you encountered either on your personal path to getting to where you are? You mentioned that you learned differently than, the usual accepted in school. And I think a lot of people can identify with that.
Right.
What other challenges have you met and overcome, either personally or professionally?
Owning a business itself is a huge challenge. I think it's also super rewarding, and it's much more rewarding than, you reap way more rewards than you do challenges. But not to say it doesn't come with challenges every day, but I feel like I learn from them and I like to challenge myself. And a lot of the challenges that I encounter almost daily is working directly with people. I work with a lot of folks that, all my clients are so different in so many different ways. Even if their businesses are different, themselves as business owners are different. And, when you're doing their marketing, you're expecting them to spend money and you're telling them their story and you're kind of asking them to open up and be vulnerable about sharing how their business came to be or what they're sharing with the community. And then you're putting it online, which that in itself is really scary for a lot of folks, especially older businesses who have been, they've never really had to market themselves before. They've just been fine on the side of the road and people just know to stop by, or they've been in the back of the phone book for 30 years. And, they're kind of like, it's nerve-wracking to now have to show up online where anyone can see everything at all times. So kind of a big challenge for me has been quality of my job gets stooped down to their comfort level, but in a way it kind of does, where if I have one client who's like, I really want to show up online and I really want people to go to my website, but I also, I don't want to take any photos of my products, or I don't want to invest in, content to be shared online, then it's like I'm kind of working with what I've got to be able to, deliver this message. So a huge challenge for me is being able to educate clients on, the importance of, okay, you're paying for my services and I want to do the best I can. And here are the kind of external factors that need to help me do my job so that I can help you. And getting clients to that point. A lot of times when they're coming to me to hire me, it's because they've never actually been online before for their business, or they've never, Milo's on the table.
Let's see Milo. Can we see Milo?
Come here. Hi. He's huge.
Milo's not impressed. Oh, he is. Hi. He's not excited.
No, just excited to be in the way. So a lot of times it's, they're coming to me online, they're putting themselves online for the first time, and I'm kind of the one that's pushing them over the edge to do it, even though they know they want to do it because they've invested in my services. But I think it's really scary for a lot of people to show up online, especially businesses that have been in business forever and never had to do this before. So a huge obstacle I have is being able to perform my job as well as I can within the parameters that a company is comfortable with. Interesting.
And so that customer relations is really, really important in a way that I wouldn't have thought, before you talked about it. And so you have, it's psychology.
And sometimes there's a lot of psychology, and there's not only a lot of psychology in marketing, but it's a lot of psychology of just working with people. And you learn a lot about people too, because, sometimes I work with a corporate company or a nonprofit, and the folks that I'm working for, obviously they're very invested in love the company that they're with, but it's not their own personal company. They're an employee of the company. So there's less emotions attached, and that often creates a lot more room for just getting the message out and strategy and, doing the job. Whereas sometimes when I'm working one-on-one with an individual business owner, there's a lot of emotion and kind of babying involved, because the business is their baby and they're now putting the reputation of it in someone else's hand to be put out for the entire world. So that in itself kind of takes a lot of, some clients are like, just do it, get it off my hands, just do it. Other clients are really, rightly so, protective over it. So I kind of have to balance respecting that and working with them on that, but also doing my job and, making it worth their while and worth their investment.
That's really interesting. Yes. I know that when you get started in a business, depending on the nature of the business, the financing piece can be really an obstacle. And so I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I, again, because I'm just such a doer, I kind of just jumped into it and then was like, oh, taxes, oh, monthly expenses, oh, now I'm really busy and I need to hire people and I have a payroll. And these are things, in the back of my mind, I knew were coming, but I just went into it not with I just went into it with I know I want to do this and I know I want to help people and I'm just going to go for it. And the rest of it kind of came after. And it reminds me kind of like buying a house or renting an apartment where, you're looking for this thing, but no one really teaches you what a mortgage is or, what your credit score means and why that's important for renting a place and how to work with that and how to get all the right resources in place. They just, you don't learn that in school. And if you don't have the right resources set up, then you're teaching yourself or you're struggling to find the resources, which is hard to, then go ahead and actually do the whole thing. So this all kind of came as an afterthought. And and I just did my best to gather my resources and kind of say, so I was doing my own bookkeeping for a while, and then I ended up hiring a bookkeeper and he's really helped me with, financial stuff and is really affordable to work with. But in terms of my own costs, I was really fortunate that running my business is primarily online. So really all I needed was my computer. And then as I started getting, what I already had, and then as I started getting a little bit more income coming in, I was able to pay for, a couple of the software pieces that I needed. And those are things that, when you price your clients out, you kind of work into it. It's not only for the time that you're spending doing the work, but if a software costs $100 a month, working in that into what you're charging people. So I kind of slowly just started building up from there, and, kind of making lists of the resources that I need and the tools that I needed, and then fitting it in where I could. And as my income has grown, my spending has grown as well, because I've needed to spend more money on resources or, softwares or hiring people. And yeah, but I'm so not a numbers person. I'm not, I'm a huge planner and I'm a budgeter, but I didn't go into my business being like, okay, I've got this amount of money. If I spend this, then I'll get this, and then I can invest this. I just went into it and then learned as I went. Similar to a lot of this we do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people tend to do that. You mentioned payroll. How many people do you have on your payroll?
Yeah, so I always have 2 interns from either UVM or Champlain every semester. And then about a year and a half ago, I ended up hiring 2 of them full time. So I have 2 people underneath me, and then I still have interns that come in.
That's
and
great.
then I outsource a lot as well, which, means sometimes there's projects that are just too big for me to handle on my own, or marketing is a really big thing, and social media marketing is a really small piece of the big marketing puzzle. And while I can do all the other things like newsletters and website developments and press releases and video content and all these crazy things that go into marketing, I like to focus just on the social media aspect. And I've gotten feedback from other companies when they've hired me that they hired me because I focus on what I do, rather than being like saying I'm this big agency that can do everything. I think people kind of like the smaller down home feel. So when that is the case, I have a couple different partners, and this is something that came with networking, someone who builds websites or someone that does more newsletter marketing, and I'll bring them to the table and I'll hire them for certain projects. And, if it's a really big project.
As an employer, do you have any advice that you could give a woman who might be coming out of incarceration, who has had, connections with the criminal justice system and is finished with that and really wants to work?
Right.
What advice would you give?
Yeah. I think, it's hard, because I think our world is somewhat divided, unfortunately, in terms of like looking at, what's on paper versus who the person is. And whenever I've done interviews, people have sent me their resume or their LinkedIn or, whatever, all these fancy, the paperwork. And I think people do that, and it's appreciated because, it's proper etiquette. It's what we're used to. It's what we're taught. But I find so much more that my connection with them and my decision is based on conversation rather than what I see on paper. And that paper, I don't know if this is really a good answer or not, but that paper is almost an afterthought of me. Like I'll kind of, after the interview, I'll be like, that was a really great conversation. I really enjoyed this person's company, and I would really like to have them on my team. And then I'll kind of look at the resume and I'll be like, okay, cool, that checks out. But it's not, for me, it's never really been solely based on that paper. And maybe for me, it's because, I came from a well-educated background, but I was never good in school. So if you were to look at my SATs or my test scores, it would be a lot different than having a conversation with me or just being my friend or being a colleague. And so maybe, that history has kind of put me into a different category. But I think we're kind of moving in that direction, hopefully. But I think so much of it, my advice is just so much more about the conversation and the presentation versus the history or, what's on paper or what's on records. And it's about, kind of moving forward and what you're doing there. And if you can interview or find a company that can like see that and honor that, then that just seems like such a great place to work rather than trying to fit in somewhere where they're more focused on, the other stuff. And I actually kind of had to make that decision myself when hiring, because I was contemplating, should I hire my interns or should I hire someone that has been working outside of college for a really long time? It's a big investment for me to have people on payroll. And I was kind of like, is it silly to invest? They're so great and they've been a huge asset to my team, but I kept questioning, is it a bad investment for me to invest in someone who hasn't been in the professional marketing world before? And I kind of kept questioning myself, and I kept going back to the fact that they've already been with me for a year and we work so well together and they perform really well. And my clients who have seen their work and know that they're working underneath me really love them. And that in itself is so much more valuable than, their degree or what's on paper or what they did before this. So that's what I've been going with.
That's such a great attitude. And I think it's so important that, especially it's interesting, like we're doing everything through distance, but we can still have a conversation online. And
Right.
I think, for everyone to be authentic and really have that come through in a conversation, that's really great for you to do that.
Yeah. And I think if someone is willing to be vulnerable and then interview or, work in a place with someone who's willing to hear that story or connect with them, then that sets them up more for success rather than someone who looks at, their piece of paper and doesn't care about history or doesn't want to connect with someone on that level. I think, and that's why I have a lot of friends who work in really big corporate companies who don't even really know the people they're sitting next to or working. And it's really hard for them to perform or motivate because they just feel like they're in this shoebox of, operators and robots almost. And so I think it's more really about who the person is than what's on paper.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And look forward to having you come in person.
Awesome. Yeah.
Great.